Okay, so now let's continue our discussion. So we have just looked at the behavior of aggregate supply curve in the short run. Right? Now we are ready to look at what happened in the long run. Okay? So this long run aggregate supply curve will show the relationship between price and the quantity of output supplied. Right? So, but you're going to see in the long run, so the sticky wage or the nominal wage will be, the nominal wage will be flexible instead of sticky. Right? So just remind yourself, in the short run, nominal wage is sticky. Okay? So this nominal wage sticky is because in the short run, there's very little room to adjust your wage contract with your employer, right? But over time, the wage must reflect changing price. The wage must be flexible. Why is that? Otherwise, the employees will complain, the employee will leave the business. So in that sense, so over the long term, the nominal wage will fully flexible and fully adjust with price change. Meaning, if price increase, the nominal wage will increase. If price decline, and the nominal wage will decline. But in the short run, so price increase, wage stay constant. Price decline, wage constant. That's in the short run. But in the long run, so the wage will adjust with price so that the employees or workers, they maintain their purchasing power. Right? To summarize, there's no change to profit simply because price has changed, as I showed you earlier, through the algebra and through a simple numerical example. Now the question is, so over long run, there are two questions. Number one, how the long run aggregate supply curve look like? And secondly, what determines the aggregate supply's position in the diagram? So first, let me show you the diagram. Okay. So given the discussion, the price becomes irrelevant for aggregate supply in the long run. Right? So your aggregate supply won't change with price. Price is high, you produce this amount. Price is low, you produce same amount. So price won't have real impact on the aggregate output, the economic supply. So now the next question is, so what determines where we are on this line, where we are? So why we are not here or why we are not here? What determines the particular position we are in this diagram? Right? So there are two questions to summarize. Okay, let me repeat. Number one, over long run, what we can produce or the aggregate supply will be independent of the aggregate price. Okay, so the way we see that is, so the aggregate supply is going to be vertical line. You change the price, it doesn't change the aggregate supply. This is number one. Number two, so we need to understand what determines where we stand in this diagram. Why we stand here, but not here or not there. Okay. Very good. So actually, where we stand in this diagram is called potential output. Okay. So the potential output is the level of real GDP the economy will produce if all price, include nominal wage, were fully flexible. Or this is what's going to happen in the long run. But what determines this potential output? So now we go to, okay, so we go to, wait. Sorry. So there are a few slides missing. So now the question is, what determines potential output? Right. So this is going to circle back to the early discussion we have when we look at economic growth. The potential output will be determined by the following things. Will be determined by capital, the amount of capital we have. Will be determined by the amount of labor we have. Will be determined by maybe land. And then finally, we'll determine by the level of technology we have, right? So this just linked to the earlier discussion we have regarding to economic growth. Okay, so those are the fundamental to the economy. So that will determine the potential output the economy can produce, not price, right? So if we look at the actual economy, look at U.S. economy from 1990 to 2014. So this blue line is the actual aggregate output. So that's what we actually produce. This line is the potential output. Right? And then so you can see they fluctuate. Okay? So again, so to understand this fluctuation, to understand this gap, we need to understand what determines potential output. So as I just said, so essentially capital, the two key things, capital and labor. Right? And also here, remember, so when we talk about labor market, so I brings you a concept of natural rate of unemployment. Okay, so here I want to emphasize, so this potential output will happen when the labor market operates at natural rate of unemployment. So that just means, okay, so if we ignore this for a second, so let's just only focus on labor market or the labor supply. Okay, so labor supply is an important ingredient in terms of produced output. Okay, so if we focus on here, so the gap is going to expand by a gap from natural rate of unemployment the economy is experiencing. Okay? Like for example here, so in this part. So we produce less than we potentially can produce. If you look at the unemployment rate, you should realize, so at that time period, the unemployment rate is much higher compared to natural rate of unemployment. All right. Or maybe you can look at here, in this time period, we are in the expansion, and then you can see the actual unemployment rate is below the natural rate of unemployment. Okay, so please link the graph or link the discussion here with the discussion we had regarding to economic growth and with the discussion we had regarding to unemployment in the labor market. Okay. Now, we can look at how the economy moved from short run to long run. Okay, so this is going to be an adjustment from short run to long run. Okay, so this is long run aggregate supply. This is short run aggregate supply. Right. So these two curves itself just tells us two different things. Short run aggregate supply just tells us how the actual output adjusts with price. This is short run aggregate supply. And long run aggregate supply, it just tells us what the economy can potentially produce. Right? So that's going to be determined by the fundamental of the economy, including capital, including labor market. Right? Okay. Say, for example, if current price is P1, and then you're going to see the short run aggregate supply or the actual output will be at level Y1. All right. So this Y1 means what? This Y1 means so you produce more than you potentially can produce. right? Because you potentially produce YP. And this implies, let's focus on labor market. This implies the actual unemployment rate is lower than the natural unemployment rate. Or in other words, the labor market is in a very good position, right? There are very few people unemployed. Okay, so that is going to give some pressure to the business in the sense if they want to expand or if they want to fill their vacancy, it becomes difficult because very few people looking for a job. Everybody has a job. If that's the case, that's going to impose a upward pressure on the wage rate. So that the employers who are looking for workers can find a worker, right? So they must raise the wage. If this labor market condition, okay, force those people who cannot find, for those business who can't find or who has hard time to find employees to work for them. If that's the case, okay, that just reflects back here, right? So you have a gap because the economies already operate beyond their potential. So the unemployment rate is very low. If that's the case, so then the economy itself is going to generate a pressure on nominal wage. The nominal wage will rise. If nominal wage rise, and then so the aggregate supply will shift back. Okay, and so this pushback happens simultaneously. Okay, so this is coming from the market force, right? So there's no government yet, but we are going to talk about the role of government later. But now, so this adjustment process happens automatically, right? So until we hit this point, we return to our long run potential. Right, so this is one case. Now, another possibility. Okay? So if the price level is such that the economy produce less than the potential output. So now conversely, this means so most of business or the economy wise, so we are operating below our potential. So this must means they are going to have high unemployment rate. Why is that? It's just because we produce less than we potentially can produce. There are many things must be idle. Now, due to the existence of high unemployment rate, so right now unemployment rate is high. It's larger than the natural rate of unemployment. Right? So how we know that is because when we operate on this line, or when we produce at our potential output level, and then so we are in the natural rate of unemployment. Okay? So right now, so we produce less than we potentially can produce. So meaning so the unemployment rate is higher. So now given this high unemployment rate, so that just means the worker will have hard time to find a job. And then the worker is willing to work for lower price. And then so the business has the luxury to reduce nominal wage because they find out very easy to find job, to find the workers. Right? So the nominal wage will decline in this particular case. So that is going to bring the aggregate supply curve shift to the right, because it's become cheaper to hire. Okay, so you can see again, so this is just automatically response. Sorry, the economy is going to automatically respond the change in the economic situation, right? Because right now, the price, as we are going to see later, so this is the price is becomes too low, right? And we have seen this before, right? So now we are pretty much ready in a position to understand what caused the trouble to the economy. Like the worst trouble we have seen, we have documented in human history. In 1933, there are 25% of unemployment rate, and the real GDP has dropped by 27%. Now we are ready to understand what made it happen. And then the next question should be, okay, so what we can do as a society? Okay, so basically the question is to the government, what the government can do. Okay. Okay, so before I explain you what caused this deep recession in the economy and what we can do, so just show you one slide to justify the sticky wage is true, right? Right. So basically, if the sticky wage, if the story is correct, right? So here, so in some sense, this is our assumption. If this assumption is correct, that just means in recession, okay? In recession, the wage will fail to fall, right? Because of the sticky. Now let's look at the actual economy, our actual data. Okay, so we look at the data from 1997 to 2013, right? So the green line is percentage of workers receiving the same wage, and the brown line is unemployment rate. All right, if there are two possibilities, if wages are flexible or if wages are sticky. Right? There are two theories or two hypotheses. Now the jury is out, so we just look at the data. So if wage is flexible, meaning when unemployment rate increase, the wage rate will decline. If wage is sticky, and meaning unemployment rate increase, the wage will stay constant or fail to adjust. Now, if we look at this particular time period, what we find out is high unemployment rate or change in unemployment rate, either way. So the increase, decrease, change in unemployment rate. So it doesn't cause the wage rate change much. Right? Here's the way we look at the change in wage rate is look at percentage of workers receive same wage. Right? So in that sense, the data tells us the sticky wage is a reasonable assumption to describe our economy. Right. So now we are ready to look at this aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. So this is a model to look at fluctuation in the economy. Right. So here we have three countries: United States, China, and Germany. So we look at 2006 to 2014. So you can see these economies are fluctuating, right? And so, right, so this is inflation, right? So now we are going to rely on the aggregate demand curve to understand the fluctuation of in price and also fluctuation in output. Right, so now let's go to the next slide. So this just formally give you the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. Just remind you what we have learned. So we have discussed the aggregate demand curve. That tells us how real GDP in terms of expenditure adjusts with aggregate price level. And then in today's class, I just explained to you the short run aggregate supply curve. So that just look at real GDP in terms of product or in terms of supply, how that adjusts with aggregate price level, right? So we have good understanding why this curve, this aggregate supply is upward. and why this aggregate demand is downward, and what caused these two curves shift, either shift to the left or shift to the right. Right? So now we are going to look at what determines the price level, what determines the actual GDP. Right? So when we look at the determination in GDP in previous chapter, we take price as a given. Now in this chapter, we relax that assumption. Right? So you're going to see price will emerge from the equilibrium, okay, as the equilibrium outcome. So if these two curves cross each other, as we seen earlier, so we are in an equilibrium. But this equilibrium is a short run, right? And so at the cross of these two curves, you have short run equilibrium price and short run equilibrium output. Okay. By the way, here, so I want to emphasize, but we are going to see that later. So this short run equilibrium, particularly in terms of output, may differ from the long run aggregate supply. All right? It may not be the same. But if we are in that situation, so you're going to see an adjustment until we reach this level. Okay? But first, let's just look at short run aggregate. Is short run equilibrium. Okay? So just now here, I'm going to explain to you what would happen if there are shocks to the economy. Okay, and then here, so there are 4 possible shocks, right? So because you have supply and demand. So in terms of supply, you have positive supply shock, negative demand shock. Sorry, negative supply shock, positive demand and a negative demand. And in terms of the impact on the economy, so you may want to see how would that affect price, how would that affect output, right? So let's just start with a negative demand shock. Okay, this row. So we have 4 cases. So if there's a negative demand shock, so the demand curve will affect it, and the demand curve will shift to left-hand side. Now you're going to see the economy is going to move from E1 to E2. If we compare E2 to E1, so that's going to tell us how a negative demand shock affect our economy. So clearly you can see, so the price will decline and output is going to decline, right? So next we look at a positive demand shock. Okay. So the positive demand shock is going to converse, is going to exactly opposite to a negative demand shock. Right. So now we are going to move from E2 to E1 to E2. And clearly you can see, so both price and output will increase. Right. So this is the second possible shock to the economy. Right. For now, you may want to pause for a second to think about what can cause a demand shock. Right? And then it's positive and negative. So to remind yourself, so we talk about the factors can cause change to or shift in demand, including expectation, including wealth, including government policy, right? So those things will constitute a shock to the demand, and it then end up with either the case we discussed in previous slides or a case we discussed here, right? So now we look at other side of the story. Sometimes maybe there's a supply shock. But again, so we can have a positive supply shock or negative supply shock. And if this is a positive supply shock, and then the curve will shift to the right. So now we are looking at supply. So the curve shift to the right, you can see, so we compare the equilibrium from E1 to E2. So you can see the price will drop, output is going to increase. Okay, so this is a positive supply shock. Now, the last case is a negative supply shock. So now you're going to see price is going to increase and output is going to decline, like because you compare E1 to E2. Okay. And again, so you may be wondering what constitutes a supply shock. So this just linked to the earlier discussion we had, the factors cause the supply curve to shift, including commodity price, including technology, also including expectation, or including the government policy, right? Okay, so those are the things can cause the supply curve to shift. Now, we are ready to look at the 4 shocks altogether, right? So remember, so I separate 4 possible cases is positive, negative, D positive, negative, and then their impact on price and the output. Okay, start with demand. So positive demand shock, increase price, increase output. Negative demand shock, decrease price, decrease output. So supply, so if there's a positive supply and the price will decline, output increase. If it's a negative supply, price increase, output decrease. Right? So I want you to pay attention to this table. Okay? From this table, the main takeaway is the following. Okay? So if it's a supply shock, whether it's a positive or negative, so that's going to cause P and Y move in opposite direction. Meaning, so if price increase and the output decrease, if price increase and output decrease, right? So they move in opposite direction. Okay. On the other hand, if there's a demand shock, and then you're going to see, so this demand shock is going to cause P and Y move in the same direction. Meaning, so either move price and output upward or move them down. Right? So this is quite important in the sense, so that's going to help us to understand what caused the trouble to our economy. Right? How we tell. So basically, so we can look at historical data to see how P fluctuate and how Y fluctuate and how they behave during this fluctuation. It turns out if we look at historical data, most of the time, so P and Y, they move in the same direction. Meaning, so whenever we observe inflation, the output increase or GDP increase, or whenever we observe a price decline or deflation, so typically we find the output declines. So this just implies, so most of the economic trouble may caused by demand shock. But this doesn't mean supply shock is not a concern at all. Actually, in different time period, we do experience demand shock. Say, for example, right now we are in a demand shock. Right? Okay, so I'm going to stop here for today, and in next class we will pick up from here. So we are going to use aggregate demand, aggregate supply model to understand the economic fluctuation. Right? Thank you so much for your attention, and see you on Monday.